Hello and welcome to the Two Guys, One Roto Show. Once again, I am joined by my tag team partner, Richard Sayer. Hello, Rich.
Hey, Dave. Glad to be with you.
We're glad to be with our listeners here on Jackie Robinson Day, 4/15, tax day, a little bit less popular than Jackie Robinson.
Yeah.
Today, again, a bit late, but better late than never, we're going to do our National League preview. So not a fantasy show today necessarily, but more of just a real baseball show. Like we said, our shows are going to be a nice melange of fantasy and reality, probably a little more fantasy heavy as we get into the episodes. But for right now, we're going to do our National League preview tonight. As we did with the American League, we're going to just simply go division by division. We're not picking records for each team, but first through fifth for each team. We'll pick the superlatives, so to speak, at the end, the Rookie of the Year, the Cy Young winner, and the MVP. And then we're going to pick who we think is going to win the pennant. So without further ado, Rich Sayer, why don't you lead us off with the National League East?
Good old NL East. Growing up in South Florida, seeing these teams, fortunate to see some of these teams a number of times. I have, hello, Captain Obvious. Well, maybe not, but I have the Braves winning this division. I think the Phillies are pretty close, but not close enough in this case. I think the Mets have a better year this year than last year. I think the Nationals are going to do better again. And then you got the Marlins for me at number 5.
Okay, interesting. We have a lot of agreement there. Braves finishing first. There seem to be one of the more obvious choices in any division, really, even amidst the loss of Spencer Strider, which I'm sure we'll talk about more here in a minute. Phillies finishing second again. I've got the Nationals actually in third instead of the Mets, although you could pretty easily talk me into flip-flopping those teams, the Nationals and the Mets. And then the Marlins, I'll talk about when we get into our team segment here in just a sec, but I've got them finishing last, although I will say I'm cheating a little bit. I'm not sure I would have had them finishing last if we had done this 2 weeks ago. So, But, all right, so why don't you talk about the Braves?
So when I look at the Braves, I see a stacked lineup, right there with the Rangers, or maybe one other team is having the best lineup in the league. The challenge for me and why I don't see them quite as strong as last year is the pitching staff is not as reliable, and that was my comment even before the Strider news came out. What would have been behind Strider, you have Fried, he's coming off an injury. Chris Sale is coming off an injury. Charlie Morton is not coming off an injury, but he's 40 years old with a pretty consistently rising walk rate. And then you got Reynaldo Lopez for your World Series aspiring Braves, which is a reliever. Sorry, I messed up my own punchline. Coming off being a reliever with bad control. So that's there's a lot of question marks for me in that lineup. There is some depth in the minors, but not a lot of guys that are really actually ready now that you can just kind of bring up and feel good about. So I see, I think they'll mostly be on cruise control with that lineup, firing on all cylinders. But I do think this is a big challenge once you get into the playoffs.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Totally agree. I still think they're easily the best team in the division over the course of 162 games, even with the loss of Strider. But kind of like you just alluded to, it definitely hurts their World Series chances. I mean, who do you throw game one here, right? Kind of thing. In a short series and a long series, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Now the Braves, Alex Anthopoulos has done nothing short of a remarkable job building this team in the whatever it's been 4 or 5 years that he's been here now. So maybe he's got another, no pun intended, ace up his sleeve that he'll go out and acquire. That's certainly a possibility. They have the farm system to do it. They don't have a great farm system, but they've got enough pieces to go out and acquire an arm or whatever. But yeah, this offense is just going to bludgeon teams into mercy is really what it boils down to. They might win a lot of 9-6 games, but they're going to win a lot of games. So that's, really what it boils down to for me. You want to talk about the Phillies next?
Yeah. So Phillies are good up top. You start with the lineup again for me. Good to great up top, but for me, it thins out quite a bit once you get to the bottom third or so. Pitching is very solid, rotation and bullpen. I think they're going to hang around. They're a good team. They could end up, they have this thing with the Braves right now. That could rear its head again. We'll see. But I don't see them on paper as being able to really hang with the Braves all season.
Totally agree. Over 162 games, no chance. There's just no chance that they hang with the Braves the whole season. In a short series, as we know, anything can happen. But and especially when you front a rotation with Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola. And I will say, even maybe Ranger Suarez. Ranger Suarez seems to be emerging a little bit this year as another good to it's not maybe not great starter, but we just talked about with the Braves. I don't know that I don't take Ranger Suarez over everybody but Chris Sale in that rotation. And so anyway, and I just want to mention for those of us out, or for those of you out there who are basketball fans, the Phillies have a lot of Miami Heat corollary to me. I'm a big Miami Heat fan, grew up in South Florida, whatever. They just always, the last few years, they always seem to be able to find that extra gear, right, in the playoffs, like Jimmy Butler mode kind of thing. I don't know what it is. Again, maybe just being able to throw Wheeler and Nola 4 times in the 7-game series doesn't hurt. But bottom line is, I see them as a playoff team. I don't see them competing with the Braves over 162 games. You want to talk about the Mets next or the Nationals?
I'll jump into the Mets, so we'll keep the format going for this division if that's good.
Yep.
So for me, this is kind of a transition year for the Mets. As I look at them, they do, if they had better pitching, they could hang, I think, a little bit closer to the Phillies or Braves. As is, they have what I think is a good lineup. They have some interesting younger pieces in Beatty and Alvarez specifically. They've got Nimmo, they got Alonso, they got Lindor. A lot of people are down on Lindor at the moment. They seem to have a short memory that he starts slowly every year, and by the end of the year, he's right there where he always is.
They're among the best shortstops in baseball. Yep.
Yeah. It's just hard for me to see them being more than a 500 team with the rotation they have. I'm not in on the Severino revival. I've never loved Manea and Quintana. I think they're more number 4 type guys.
Yep.
They do have some interesting pieces maybe coming up. We'll see what happens there. But I think this is kind of a consolidation or a transition year into the next, Mets team, and hopefully get Senga back and you're ready to make a move next year.
Yeah, totally agree. No, this is, for me, I put down, they're doing exactly what a team with a massive borderline unlimited payroll should do, right? They went in all in last year and it didn't work. And so they made the baseball decision. It was kind of like when Cohen was first brought on board, and he was asked about cutting Robinson Cano, and he said make the baseball decision, not don't make. I don't want to keep rolling this guy out there, even though he's making $30 million a year or whatever it was. Like if you think cutting him is the right baseball decision, do that. This is what they did. They traded Scherzer, they traded DeGrom. They got themselves out from under the payroll or the luxury tax for 1 year, and I see them reloading big time, like big time going into 2025. But yeah, tread water this year. Just kind of keep your fans interested, keep your season ticket holders beholden to the games, and and then
sort out what you have.
Figure out if not even just the pieces like Brett Beatty or Francisco Alvarez, who are not a sure thing certainly, but hopefully more likely than not. But like a DJ Stewart, for example, or like can he be part of it? A platoon or something. Can we use this guy somewhere? Like Jose Quintana, we can rely on this guy as our number 4 starter on our next playoff team, that kind of stuff. So anyway, Nationals next. I'll lead off with the Nationals if that's okay. So this team is interesting-ish from a lineup perspective in that they've got some pieces that are, like Lane Thomas had a really good year last year. CJ Abrams in the second half last year was quite good and is off to a good start this year. They've got some pieces that are not altogether boring, I guess is the best way of putting it. But by and large, what is this team doing this year? They're treading water until more reinforcements arrive, right? And we talked about rotations with the other teams. I mean, this team has no pitching outside of Mackenzie Gore. And I'm talking starting or bullpen, really. Maybe Hunter Harvey, I guess. But, I mean, we're talking slim pickings in both the rotation, especially amidst the injury to oh, God. Totally drawing a blank on the guy who just went down with an elbow problem for them. But anyway, so bottom line is that this is a tough team to start, and they're going to get 160 reliable innings out of Mackenzie Gore, and they're going to get 1,000 other innings out of Brandon Finnegan or Kyle Finnegan rather. I don't even know who they're getting innings from. I couldn't even name a player. So anyway, rough team.
Yeah, very similar to kind of my write-up. I do see them, making some headway this year now. Again, benefit of doing this, a week or so into the season. It's a very small sample, but from what I've seen from CJ Abrams, that looks like now you have somebody that could be a real building block on your offense. But for me, it's him, it's Lane Thomas, and 7 journeymen in the lineup. The pitching staff is Mackenzie Gore and 3 or 4 journeymen. Like you said, there's just not what else is there? It's almost like a blank canvas. It will be interesting. So along with Abrams, Wood looks like he's made maybe a leap again from where he was or where he could be. It looks like he could contribute in a meaningful way this year, and I would not have said that in the offseason or at the end of last year. And then you got behind him, you got House, you got, hopefully Cruz, maybe a couple other guys. So now it can be, it can be interesting. Like where do we go from here? For the first time in a little while, you got something that's kind of like a roadmap.
Yes. All right. So where do we go from here? We go to the Marlins. Why don't you talk about the Marlins a little bit?
Yeah. So outside,
if you've got the stomach for it.
When I'm looking at the Marlins, you have to have, I think, Arise, and you have to have Chisholm both healthy and being productive, or the lineup is not terrible. And kind of, I think the idea was that the hitters could hold their own a little bit. You could piece together things, and the pitching staff is going to carry you. And we've just seen injury after injury and questions there. And it just looks like a total loss year to me for the Marlins right now. They made the playoffs last year, 84 wins, but they were one of the worst teams in the National League in run differential. So maybe a little bit of mirage last year. They got ahead of themselves. They got hot at the right time. They won some games, but not a lot of foundation there.
Yeah, totally agree. And counting on Arise is fine. I mean, whatever, he's fine. But counting on Jazz Chisholm to be healthy is a fool's errand. Right. And so I'm cheating a bit here. Like I probably would have had them 3rd or 4th if we had done this 2 weeks ago. But then all of their pitchers got hurt in the last 2 weeks, right? And the best way I can sum up the Marlins, Jake Berger hit the IL today or yesterday. I don't remember when it was.
Yeah.
Like who? Are you kidding me? That matters. That it matters. Not only does it matter, it matters a lot. This team has no offense, and all of their pitchers are hurt. And then they're ostensibly their best. Their number 3 hitter, Jake Berger, hit the IL. This team feels much, much more like a 94 loss team than an 84 win team. So
and that was the end of my comment or my notes that I wrote for myself here. Is that if they're going to be competitive, they've got to figure out how to onboard hitters, whether that's free agents, whether that's trades. They got some, return on that last year, or development that, they haven't gotten any of that in years.
Yeah, good point. Yep, good point. So, all right. Do we want to talk about I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to leave it up dealer's choice here. Do we want to talk about the Central next, which is a division that I absolutely cannot stand, or do we want to skip to the West and then go back to the Central? So do we want to sandwich the middle?
Let's get it over with, and then we'll
rip the Band-Aid off.
The West has some stuff to talk about, I think.
So I'm going to lead off the Central, begging your permission, Rich Sayer. This division is an absolute cluster. You know what? Okay. If those of us who grew up in, say, like the 80s and 90s, and when you stayed home sick from school, you watched The Price is Right. Like we all watched everybody watched The Price is Right when you stayed home sick from school. It was on 11 in the morning, Bob Barker, the whole thing, right? And they had the game. One of the games was you got a certain number of dice, and you got to place the dice in the price of the car, and whatever. And then it would tell you how many you got right and wrong or whatever. Yes. That's the NL Central. And I could get all 5 of these right, and I could get all 5 of these wrong, and nothing would surprise me at all. Like not one bit. I have no idea what's happening here. It's chaos division beyond belief.
Yeah.
So, all right, lead us off with your order on that note.
So I agree in a lot of ways with you. I do think the Cubs, in my opinion, are above the rest of the teams in the league. I've got them winning the division. I've got the Reds surging a little bit, being competitive. Pirates, Brewers, who knows? And then I have the Cardinals as last, but not necessarily leaps and bounds below Pirates and Brewers.
Interesting. Okay, so I actually have the Reds winning this division. We'll talk more about that why later, but I have the Pirates in second. I'm a Buccos believer. I've got the Cubs finishing third. The Cardinals, St. Louis Cardinals in fourth. So best fans in baseball, not going to be happy with that. And then the Brewers, who, oh, by the way, have the best record in baseball right now, and I have them finishing last in their division. So there's that.
So like yours more than mine, the best fans, that is. So yeah.
Yes. Well, I suppose that's true. All right. Why don't we let's talk about the Cubs. Let's go ahead and go with your order like we usually do, because I actually have an interesting little mini research project that I did on the Cubs. But you give your take first, and then I'll talk about it.
All right. So for me, I think they're a solid team. I think they have a solid lineup. I think they have a solid bench. I see Suzuki kind of blossoming this year. He's had a nice trend since he's been over in the States, as far as increasing from not great to maybe a pretty good season this year. There's nobody I think that's elite. There's no MVP type carrying player, but I don't see really a lot of weak spots in the lineup. I think the pitching staff is pretty good as well. Now, I am counting on Justin Steele coming back shortly and him being healthy in that statement. Yeah. I think there's some opportunity to improve in the bullpen, but I don't think it's a crazy weakness either. So, and I think they have a lot of prospects, hitters and pitchers, that are pretty close to the majors that can contribute this year.
Yeah, no doubt.
I see a lot of positives here. I don't think this is a dominant team, but it's a little bit like the AL Central. Like, I think you don't have to be that great to look good in this division.
Sure. Okay, that's fair. So I said the same thing. That it's interesting how you framed it, that they have a bunch of good players and nobody great. And I said I might be, in my notes to myself were either I might be underrating them, because they might be a team full of like 2.5 to 3.25 win players. No one scares me here, but maybe they're just good top to bottom, and that's there's something to be said for that, right? And I wanted to go on a rant on the Cubs to say, like, you're the actual Chicago Cubs. Like, so you play in a division with Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, and Milwaukee, right? Which are at least 3 cities, if not 4, that if we started the country over today, nobody would live there, right? Like, the only reason people live in those cities is because there was steel mills there 50 years ago or whatever, right? Yeah. And so that's the reason the Pirates exist, right? But the Cubs, like, you're the Chicago, like, you're in the second city, right? You should just be blowing everybody out of the water payroll wise, and you're one of the most recognizable brands in sport, right? Turns out I was totally wrong about that. So I went and did some homework on both counts. I went and did some homework on it. Forbes ranked the Cubs as the 39th most valuable sports in the world, not in the United States, but the 39th most valuable sports franchise in the world. So I would expect them to be top 15 or 20. They're not. And they're spending $225 million on their payroll this year. The Cardinals are second at 175 in this division. So they're outspending their competition by a quarter, basically. So they're doing exactly what I think I thought they should be doing. Turns out they're doing it. So
it was close. Like, they played chicken a little bit this offseason and they came out ahead. It could have gone the other way.
That's true. That's true.
But it turned out, I think, good for them at the moment. So
So all right, who you have second?
So I got the Reds. Obviously, I like what they're doing. I still think this is more of a growth year. I think they have a really nice young core. That's not saying anything that should be surprising. But I think the McLean and the Marte absence is going to be tough for them. I think there's, the pitching is still young and unreliable. So I think there's going to be some disappointing games there, some games that you think you should have won when you look back at the season. and you didn't end up getting it done. But I think there's a lot of upside here for the next few years with the Reds.
Okay. I can't necessarily disagree with that. I will say they've got the third best run differential in baseball so far. And for me, they already have two, like we just talked about the Cubs having like 2.5 win players, right?
Yeah.
So they're getting Jake Fraley back at some point, who's kind of in that mold of like a 2.5 win player, and Noelvi Marte, who probably is in the same, 2.5 win or so player. They're getting those guys back for free. Like those are already in the season additions that they're going to get to make that cost them nothing. And then I don't know why I got nothing. I have no, obviously I have no insight. I was just going to say I have no inside info. No kidding. We have like 10 followers. But this just feels to me like a big in-season addition team. Like the ownership is ready to say, you know what, let's go out and get that big name starter who hits the market or whatever. And I don't hate their bullpen. Doesn't thrill me. I think Alexis Diaz wildly overachieved last year. I think gets more credit than he deserves because of his last name and who he's related to. But their rotation I don't hate. I think Lodolo is pretty good. I think Graham Ashcraft is a league average starter. So are they great? No, but do you have to be great to win the NL Central? No. So, All right, who you got next?
So number 3-ish, because I have the Pirates and Brewers right about the same. But I'll say the Pirates because I put them third. Okay. So obviously they started the year very hot, but they did last year as well. Now this year it does feel a little bit different. I think probably because Jones has been performing very well. Everyone sees what Skeens is doing in AAA. So you drop those guys in. It feels a little bit more solid than maybe last year did. Also, O'Neal Cruz is playing well. He's healthy, being productive. So this, all of a sudden, you got the Pirates or the Buccos for quite a number of years as kind of an afterthought or a joke. They got some pieces now.
Yeah.
So and they're kind of like maybe following in, what the Reds are doing. They have a nice kind of roadmap or a nice kind of runway potentially to be a legitimate team for a number of years down the future. So I have them right about 500 this year, but I like the direction that they're going finally.
Yep. So this is, very, I don't know, very light and duty analysis, I guess is the best way to put it. But I've watched a number of Buccos games this year, right? They happen to play during the day a lot. And so while I am working, I shouldn't be saying that on the air, but whatever, I have them on in the background and I can kind of catch some of the Pirates games, whatever. And I just think they're better than the general consensus. And we talked about during the American League preview, excuse me. And again, reference Russell Carlton's piece from a few years back at Baseball Prospectus. All it really takes is 3 stars, and you're a good team. I think they got one in the rotation in Jones. I mean, we'll see if he's, I don't know if he's going to throw 200 innings this year, but we've got a good, great starter in Jones. They've got one at the plate in O'Neal Cruz, and they've got one defensively in Ke'Bryan Hayes. I mean, Ke'Bryan Hayes could put up a 4.5, 5-win season. That wouldn't really be all that surprising if he just has to stay healthy, right? Those 3 things happen, this team's competing for the division. So anyway, we'll see. All right, 4th, you got the Brewers?
I got the Brewers,
Okay, go ahead.
Short notes here. I think they're just short a couple of hitters, but a lot of pitching to be competitive in the division. They have some guys in the minors, so it's not doom and gloom necessarily, but I don't see them really being anything other than a 500 team in best case scenario this season.
Yep, totally agree. For me, this is I'll compare them to what I did with the Tigers in the American League Central, where they will be in the race. They'll be close enough because nobody's going to probably run away with the NL Central. They'll be close enough, and especially with them being off to this hot start and all that. But I think come trade deadline time, they're more likely to move Willy Adames or Freddie Peralta or Devin Williams or whatever than they are to add to that core. I think they've got a longer view, building around the Jackson Churios of the world than they're going to try and fool themselves into a World Series contender this year. All right, and that leaves us the St. Louis Cardinals. So you go ahead and piss off their fan base first.
So when you look at the roster, it doesn't really seem like this should be a sub 500 team. But basically with, mostly the same group, they only got to 71 wins last year, but they had the 2nd worst run differential in the National League. And then you go from there. Who's got upside, or who are they replacing with a guy that has upside from the roster last year? Jordan Walker certainly does, but he's got to figure out how to hit the ball in the air to get there. Based on the current rosters, not just this year, I think this could be the worst team in the Central for the next 2 or 3 years.
Interesting.
That's where I'm at with the Cardinals. Not terrible. It's not like A's or White Sox or maybe even Marlins we just mentioned, but I just don't see the upside.
Totally agree. Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, this is my comment was, holy cow, they're old, right? They got like the most recognizable losing team in baseball, if that makes sense, right? Like they've got names that made All-Star team. Not that Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt, still good players, but not the players they once were, right? And kind of to your point, short of like, let's just say, I don't know, like Jordan Walker, Mason Wynn, and Lars Nootbaar all of a sudden all turning into 5-win players all at the same time. I just don't see a path to the playoffs for this team at all. And they have no depth for the rotation in the high minors. And their rotation is filled with injury-prone, terrible old pitchers. So what happens when those guys stink or get hurt or whatever? I don't know. I mean, nothing surprises me with the Cardinals. We're going to revisit this probably at the end of the season. They're going to win 95 games, and we're going to be like, how did that happen? Paul DeYoung is going to get traded back to them and hit 30 homers or something. But yeah, boy, I look at this roster and I just don't see any, path to anything. But I have them 4th place. You have them 5th. Fine, take your pick. I don't care. So So all right, moving on to the West. Why don't you lead us off with the Dodgers?
With the Dodgers, there you go. So Dodgers number 1. I have the Padres 2nd. Giants, your World Series contending Diamondbacks 4th, and then I don't think anybody will argue with Rockies 5 either. So let's see if we got the top and the bottom of the sandwich. What do we have the same middle?
Yes. So Dodgers obviously winning the division. I think that's maybe the easy. That might even be an easier call than the Orioles. Hard to say. I don't know. They're good. I've got I still believe in the Diamondbacks. I'm still buying the Snakes. So I think they need to get healthy, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, I have them 2nd. I have the Giants 3rd, the Padres 4th, which I'll talk about again why here in a minute. And the Rockies are rock piling as they always do. No direction, no plan, no nothing, just finishing last. So
they're in contention with some of the other teams I just mentioned for worse.
They're right there. They're right there with we'll let's just get the Rockies out of the way. Let's end on a positive note. We'll start with the Rockies. So the Rockies, my notes on the Rockies, check this out. This is incredible. They have a negative 34 run differential through 36 games. Through 36 games. How's that even possible? It's just they're right there with the White Sox and the A's. I actually would put them below the A's. I think they're the 2nd worst team in baseball. There's just nothing to point at. And again, you could look at their farm system and you can say they've got, like they just drafted Chase Dollander, or they've got some younger Yanquiel Fernandez, Adil Amador, some other interesting type prospects, except for none of the Rockies prospects ever work out ever. So it doesn't matter. I don't know what this team's doing. So anyway, anything to add?
So my notes on the Rockies, totally uncompetitive team, too many holes in the lineup, and AA and AAA pitching staff in terms of talent level. It's shocking to me that this is a team that has a payroll of $135 or $140 million. I don't even understand how that's possible.
Right. Well, at least they have Chris Bryant. All right. Going on. Dodgers. Let's talk about something fun. Dodgers. Go ahead.
Best top end of the lineup in the league, without a question for me. They do have, I think, some weakness at the bottom, 3 spots in the lineup. I'm sure they'll sort that out through the season. I don't really need much from those guys at the moment. And just a high-end rotation as well. On the pitching side, there are a lot of moving pieces. There is more uncertainty, but there's just so much depth they can plug in from AAA or make a move. It doesn't really matter. Like the whole season is just a tune-up for their World Series run. Now they've only done once, and they've had teams like similar to this before. I don't even necessarily want to say like this because it's really an amazing group of players. But until they do it in the playoffs consistently, they're still going to have this kind of stigma. But I have them challenging for 110 wins this year.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, totally agree. Josiah Gray, if I was in the pitcher on the Nationals that I was trying to think
of. Know that he got hurt, but yeah.
Yes, he got hurt. Yes. So anyway, no, but yeah, the Dodgers, I agree. My note was that they might have the best 1, 2, 3 lineup ever. I mean, literally ever. Like, I mean, there's probably others that I would have to do some more research on that and whatever. But I find I'm hard pressed to believe that there's a much better one than
the vibe right now.
3 former MVPs. Now I will say, they do have, I mean, don't get me wrong, they got Glasnow, they got Yamamoto, Walker Buehler's on his way back, but Bobby Miller just hit the IL. They just shut Emmett Sheehan down. They've got they do have, obviously they've got other people, Gavin Stone, they've got some other pieces, whatever. They seem, given the kind of your point about the Rockies, where like, how does this team possibly have this $150 million payroll or whatever and be this bad? The Dodgers are running this $300 million payroll or whatever. I guess not 300, but whatever it is. And they don't, there's some holes in the rotation there and in the bullpen given how not bloated, but given how high that payroll is. That said, they're going to overwhelm this division. They're going to win this division probably by 10 games. So maybe more. So, all right, who you got second?
For me, it's the Padres. For me, I think they have one of the better lineups in the league, even taking Juan Soto out of the equation. They could use a better third base option if Machado's not going to be able to play there this year. But they have, again, pieces they can move around. For me, it's what's interesting about this team, or what it's going to come down to probably, is a rotation is this weird kind of yin and yang of high-end guys in the past, maybe starting to fade, but maybe holding on. And then you got a bunch of like unproven wild cards. And that's, I think, really what it's going to come down to for them this season. They went with a deep bullpen strategy, and that's been a strength so far. So I just don't see anybody else. We'll talk about the Diamondbacks in a second, but for me, it was the Padres at number 2 in this division.
Okay, so I have the Padres 4th. But not by a lot. Again, kind of like we talked about the Central, the Diamondbacks, Giants, and Padres. I think are fairly interchangeable pieces, and you could talk me into any order. But I do have the Padres 4th. Part of the reason being they've already allowed 90 runs through 16 games or whatever. And they're rotate, kind of like you said, you get like Yu Darvish, Joe Musgrove, what is Michael King, all these things, whatever. But there's not necessarily a lot of reinforcements on the way. I mean, they do have some guys in the upper minors-ish, and they got like Drew Thorpe and whoever from the Yankees. I don't know. There's some pieces there, whatever. And like you said, they do have this deep bullpen, but I do wonder if their rotation is built with 5 and dive guys, which granted, most of the league is 5 and dive guys now, but whatever. Their rotation is built with these guys like Yu Darvish and Joe Musgrove don't go 7 innings anymore. They go 5. I just wonder if this bullpen is completely washed by the 4th of July and they really fade hard in the second half. So
yeah, you can definitely see that. Yep.
So all right, who you got 3rd in the division? I guess is where we're going.
I got the Giants. The lineup, I think, right now is below average, but they do have some younger bats that you would hope maybe come up and help as the season goes along. That's not a lock, but it could be a Matos, it could be Luciano, it could be Ramos. Rotation, I think, is really strong. That's what I like about this team. To agree with that statement, you have to buy into Jordan Hicks. That's a little bit of still a question mark. He's looking good so far.
He's great.
But yeah, Harrison's looking better than I think maybe you thought he would this early in his kind of starting career in the majors. Then they had Snell, and then they got Ray coming back, theoretically in the second half of the season. So I think that's a real strong point. I think in that park that plays really nicely. It's just going to be a question of, where are they getting the offense from? Do they have any of those young guys that kind of really break out?
So they, for me, the Giants, I have them third also. And the Giants are the inverse of the Braves for me, right? Where the Braves are going to bludgeon their opponents into submission every day. The Giants are going to throw a capable starter out there every day who's going to give you 5, 6, 7 innings. Jordan Hicks has looked good so far, but for me to buy these suddenly 180 inning guy that'd be shocking. But anyway, but they throw a capable starter at you every day of the week. But as Grant Brisbee, who is a friend of the show, and by friend of the show I mean I've never met him, points out on Twitter, like every single day, multiple times a day, they don't seem to be aware that scoring runs is part of winning. So they are going to have to win an awful lot of 3-2 games to be competitive this year. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I just don't know how sustainable that is. All right, that leaves us with the Diamondbacks. You've got them fourth. I've got them second. Why don't you go ahead and start off?
Yep, and I'll mention, just ordinal rankings, second, third, and fourth. I somewhat arbitrarily threw out a win total. And then just to reference your point on kind of how interchangeable these teams are, I got the Padres around 85 and the Giants and the Diamondbacks both around 82. So there's not a lot, in my separating the group of teams. Should be interesting as the year goes on. When I look at the Diamondbacks, obviously they were in the World Series last year, but pull that away, it's an 84-win team that had a negative run differential on the season. Yep. So I think this season is going to be more treading water than sinking, but it feels like it's going to be a disappointment relative to what they did last year. Lineup is more solid than good or great for me. Gallen is a great pitcher. Kelly is solid. But then, what happens after that? Hopefully Erod is, which nobody calls him that, as you pointed out, comes back. But I don't see the rotation being an asset for them. I don't think have a great bullpen. And I think that's going to hurt them.
Yeah, so there's nothing there that I can disagree with, and I'm still going to pick him second, if that makes any sense, right? So, obviously we know this, right? Like, generally speaking, not always, but as a general rule, water finds its level. Teams that overachieve one year tend to regress the next, whatever. For me, they just have staying power. It's well documented. Well, for those of you who are plugged into Twitter like nerds like we are, but like Corbin Carroll, for example, has been on something of a power outage since the last half of last year or whatever. I still think he's one of the better hitters in baseball, even if he's not hitting dingers. I don't care. They've got other great pieces in them. Christian Walker is a good hitter and a wonderful defender. Ketel Marte is a good hitter. Eugenio Suarez has got some pop still in his, even here late in his career. They send Jock Peterson, who's a great hitter against righties. And then, like you said, they got Zach Gallen, they got Merrill Kelly. The setback with Eddie Rodriguez, I think, is a big deal. I agree that's tough. If I remember correctly, they signed Jordan Montgomery, no?
They did, actually, yeah. So I think I read this started these notes before that.
Yeah. So maybe
that's a big part.
Yeah, maybe that helps them some. And I'm a big Brandon Pfaadt guy. Anybody who listens to me ever knows that I love Brandon Pfaadt. So their bullpen is definitely a big question mark, especially with their closer going down early. But bottom line is, pick any 2 through 4 you want. I'm just picking the Diamondback second because it's my write up and I'm allowed to. That's why. So all right. We want to talk about our playoff teams. We've obviously got the Braves and the Dodgers both winning the East and the West, respectively. Yep. You've got the Cubs in the Central. I've got the Reds in the Central. Who are your wild card teams, sir?
Yep. So I've got the Reds coming in as a wild card, so they still make the dance, so to speak. I got the Phillies, and then I've got the Padres.
Okay, fair enough. So I've got the Phillies as well. We overlap there. I've got the Pirates. I'm a Bucco believer. I'm going to take the Pirates, taking a wild card spot this year out of the NL Central, and then the Diamondbacks. Again, finishing second in their division. I think they finish probably right around the same number of wins as last year, 84, 85 wins. I think they're probably the last playoff team, but they're the playoff team. So, so there we go. All right, you want to talk about your rookie of the year in the National League?
Yes, I would go at this point in time. I would go Jackson Churia.
Okay.
I think he's got obviously the talent. I think he's going to rack up the at-bats. He's going to play all year. And I think that gives him the edge over Yamamoto, and then Skeens or Jones, who, we don't know when Skeens is going to come up, but I'm going Churio.
Okay, interesting. So I actually would counter the Churio argument. I think Churio's volume is going to work against him because I don't think his rate stats are going to be all that spectacular this year. Like his WAR total will be higher because he will have played more, but I don't think his rate stats are going to be all that spectacular in his first year in the bigs. But my pick for National League Rookie of the Year is James Wood. I think to your point, he comes up sooner than expected. This dude's got granted we're whatever 16 games into the season or whatever it is, but he's got a 500 on base and 1130 OPS at AAA right now. I think he comes up and is one of these electric call-ups and whatever, and gets called up say like May 12th or whatever and hits like 27 dingers the rest of the way. Just one of these electric, like when James Wood is at the plate, you want to turn your MLB.TV to watch James Wood. So James Wood's my pick for Rookie of the Year.
That's a little bit of the De La Cruz vibe before he cooled off at the end of the year last year. Yeah.
So who you got for Cy Young?
Cy Young. So this is the spot that would have gone to Spencer Strider if we had done this before the season started. I've got Zach Wheeler taking this. I think he's just very good and very consistent. He's going to have the rate stats. He's going to have the numbers by the end of the year. I've got Glasnow coming in second-ish. Yamamoto, I think, will be there. I've got Yamamoto in the Rookie of the Year discussion as well. And then depending on when Steele comes back, he could be a factor, or Hunter Green. But I'm giving it to Zach Wheeler.
Okay. So I've got Tyler Glasnow taking home the award. I think that this is, as we talked about with the American League, I'm a big narrative guy. I think he gets the trade to the National League, to the Dodgers rather, to from small market to big market, and takes the leap, right? And goes out and puts up something. I think Tyler Glasnow has a superlative year, especially from a traditional category standpoint. It goes like 18-4 or something like that, whatever. And he's looked great, obviously, early here in his career. And that's to say nothing of the fact that the dude looks exactly like Cillian Murphy, which I don't know what that means, but it's a thing. So anyway, all right, National League MVP.
MVP, I've got Mookie Betts. I've left the second spot blank, just as an emphasis point. But then obviously, I think Acuna is going to be in the discussion. I think Tatis is going to have a really good year this year. And then I think Ohtani will be in the mix as well.
Yeah. So I got Mookie as well. So that's we agree on a pick. Those of you who know me at all know that I think Mookie Betts is the best player in baseball, bar none, over and above Ohtani, even when Ohtani's pitching. And I think obviously, like you said, Ohtani, Acuna will have something to say about that. If the Padres make the playoffs, Fernando Tatis will be a big reason why. So again, narrative, maybe pushes his way into the MVP discussion because he pushes a Padres team over the brink or whatever. But I just think Mookie Betts, with the start he got off to already, has such a big lead on everybody. And I don't necessarily, he's not going to sustain a 1,300 OPS the whole year. But, but at the end of the day, this guy's, both his rate stats, his WAR, and his counting stats are just going to be off the damn charts. Hitting ahead of Ohtani and Freeman all year. So
and for the career he's had so far, I do think it's realistic that this ends up being his career year. So,
which is crazy, right? Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, who takes home the pennant?
Not controversial, not a lot of clicks, but I would go the Dodgers. I would have liked to have been convinced that it could have been the Braves, but I just don't see them having the pitching to hold up in a postseason series.
Okay. Clickbait. The Cincinnati Reds taking home the pennant on the strength of, I don't know who the pitcher they add is, but whoever the pitcher they add is gives them like a Doyle Alexander like boost down the stretch. and wins, 3 playoff games, like almost like a CC Sabathia for the Brewers, back in the day when he got traded from Cleveland to Milwaukee. So yeah, I got the Reds as the buzz team. Noelvi Marte will not be eligible for the playoffs, but they're gonna get like we said, they're gonna get Fraley back. They're gonna get. I'm telling you, they're gonna get a pitcher. They're gonna get a couple bullpen pieces. Reds all the way. Big red machine against the Rangers in the World Series, which we both picked the Rangers to win the American League pennant. While we're here, why don't we wrap up our previews with who wins the World Series? Rangers versus Reds/Dodgers. Who you got?
So I would go Rangers. I just, I think for me, the lineup is stacked. We've talked about that. And I am really intrigued by seeing DeGrom and Scherzer coming out, who knows when, for 3 or 4 innings at a time. I think that's going to be a really interesting playoff series. If that happens, I think it's the Rangers that take it. Otherwise, I think they come up maybe a little bit short on the pitching side.
Yeah, nope, I agree. It's the Rangers. We haven't had a back-to-back World Series winner in a number of years. We're due, so it's the Rangers.
Yep.
So
there you go.
All right, folks, thanks for joining us again. We really enjoyed doing these preview shows. Next show, we'll get back to some sort of fantasy content for those of you who enjoy that better. But the preview shows were important for us, and we wanted to get them out there. Really enjoyed the time with you, Rich, as always. Any parting words?
Just enjoy keeping it real with you.
Yep. All right, thanks, everybody. Click, like, subscribe. We'll talk to you soon.
2 Guys, 1 Roto. See you next time.